Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Pierre the Chef. I am Steve. I am joined, as always, by my friend Christopher.
Hello.
And yet again, no Pierre. Where
Yeah,
is Pierre?
I got a brief message from him. He said something about actually he mentioned having a possible opportunity to meet Gordon Ramsay.
Oh,
I thought
God.
that there's got to be something about, like, I asked about an autograph. He got very upset because he's more concerned about the chef aspect of it, learning something about cooking, and he was kind of insulting about me asking that. And that was Wednesday, and I haven't heard from him since.
Okay. I mean, it's we do one of these a month.
Yeah.
You know what really makes me angry? It's the ingratitude. Because you have a YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel. Pierre does not have a YouTube channel.
No, he does
And yet through the kindness of our hearts, we not only invited him to be our co-host on this show, but we named it after him. And
he was very appreciative about that.
Yes, he has yet to make one show.
Well, they say third time's a charm, but I don't think that applies here.
Oh yeah, I don't know. He'll probably, he'll PM me as soon as we're done and be like, "Sorry, I couldn't make it." And I'll be like, "What was Gordon Ramsay like, Pierre?"
He's very insulting.
It's ridiculous.
Because he's dealing with an adult.
Well,
Gordon Ramsay can turn it on and off at will. I mean, you see him dealing with kids, and he's fantastic. Yeah.
yeah. Or if he's on, like I saw Ramsay the other day on Colbert, and he was delightful. He told that anecdote that he's told a few other places about how he bought his children livestock so that they could raise them and then eat them. What a lovely story. You raise your own turkey and then you send it off to the slaughterhouse.
Yeah, the best way to make people vegetarian. Get attached to the animals, and then yeah,
it's good parenting. You'll appreciate it more if you're eating what you've raised yourself.
Eating a friend.
Your club sandwich is your friend.
I knew this sandwich when I called it David.
Exactly. This sandwich had a name and a heart, and I loved it. And now I'm eating it.
Nobody names the fruits and vegetables, just the animals.
You like that fruit salad? That's Jeff. That's Terry. Molly. They were great.
Yeah, Rick had kind of a bad attitude, so he's not in this one.
He's
we were going to put some Pierre in, but we couldn't find him.
Right. I opened the drawer and I thought Pierre was supposed to be there, and he was just gone. I don't know. It's like Pee-wee's Playhouse. You close the door and they start moving around.
Never watched that, actually.
You've never watched Pee-wee's Playhouse?
Nope. I'm an uncultured boar. You know that.
That shocks me. Okay. It's on Netflix if you want to check it out.
That shocks me. All right, I'm over it.
It's not like you told me you never watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or something. I mean, okay.
I actually didn't. No.
You never watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
Not really. I watched Sesame Street. I watched The Electric Company. Didn't watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was on a different time, and I just never saw it. Watched the original He-Man.
Well, okay, there you go. That's like the blood of Christ. That absolves all sins. I watched He-Man. Okay, we're cool.
You may have overstated that a little bit, but okay.
Not to me, baby. Not to me.
And I saw one episode of the second go-round and the third go-round, and I wasn't impressed by either.
Yeah, it wasn't. The original show just has certain charms that have never been duplicated. Well, it's like when somebody does something terrible, but they're trying to do something good.
Yeah.
And then you replicate it, and it's just not the same. Like there's something just perfect about a bad show that is made by people who are trying to make a good show.
Yeah, isn't this, they say camp cannot be manufactured, can only be discovered?
Yeah, exactly. Although the one maybe possible exception to that might be the Batman show from the 60s, because that was intentionally written as campy and silly, and it nails it pretty close.
Yeah. My friend Dennis showed me one time a movie, The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, and then a sequel, The Lost Skeleton Rides Again. And those are, I was watching, thinking, this is pretty close to manufactured camp. It's a lot of fun.
You can get very close to it if you know exactly what you're doing, but it's very, very difficult. I would,
because if you're doing that on purpose, there's that big urge to look at the camera.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To pat yourself on the back and say, "Look what a good job I'm doing."
Just look at the camera and smirk, and you blow the whole thing like that.
Yeah, but I mean that's with that's with any kind of humor where it relies on there being a straight man. I mean that's why Leslie Nielsen was so great in Airplane, because he never, you didn't seem like he was trying to be funny at all. Right. He just played it straight the entire time and never broke once.
And he'd always played very dramatic, normal, formal characters in the past. The Leslie Nielsen that we knew from that point forward was not the Leslie Nielsen who existed before that.
No, yeah, he was very straight. Well,
it's like bringing in somebody who's very severe and very deadpan and throwing him into comedy and letting him be himself, and it plays off it so well.
Yeah, I mean, because people forget, because we know Leslie Nielsen as the white-haired guy from The Naked Gun and Airplane, but I mean, he was the commander in Forbidden Planet,
right?
And was as straight-laced as you get.
Mm-hmm. He had like 2 different careers.
Yeah. So that was fun. Now let's talk about online abuse.
Nice segues.
I don't do segues. How do you segue?
You've had a YouTube channel for how long, and that's the best you can segue?
How do you segue from, Leslie Nielsen and camp humor to let's talk about online abuse?
Yes.
Speaking of,
because it starts early in school. The biggest lie that is told at school is not that the rest of the world looks up to us as leaders, because they don't anymore. It's not that our ancestors came over and tamed a savage, unpopulated wilderness, because that's not what happened. The biggest lie we're told in school is bullying will not be tolerated.
Oh yeah, because I know I get the impression. And I don't have kids in school. You've had the experience of being a parent. But I mean, when I was a kid, bullying was definitely tolerated.
Oh, yes.
Unofficially, tacitly. I mean, it was always against the rules, but it always occurred.
And nobody really did anything about it.
Nobody really did anything about it. Yeah.
The school is a little bit more progressive about it, because when we first started, it was a big shock for my kids. Have been in a different school district, which was in the same school district as a college, and they had a bit of money for that, and so they were putting effort into anti-bullying. They were starting it young, at the beginning of kindergarten, 1st grade, and explaining it and dealing with it. And so from the ground up, bullying was dealt with. And then they came here, and a bit of culture shock. But after a year or 2, the school started taking it a bit more seriously. Actually, I think that that may have been because I believe there was a suicide from a student a couple of years. We were here a year or 2, one of the students committed suicide, and bullying was a large part of it. And that's usually when they step up and start making some sort of efforts. I mean, there's anti-bullying things up in the lobby of the high school and stuff, but still, there's an extent to which it's just, kids will be kids, let it be. And then, but what that does is we end up defending the bully and protecting them, and the victim doesn't get any particular concern. And the bullies learn they can get away with it because no one will ever do anything about it. And so every now and then, when a kid completely snaps, and people respond, well, it was just this one statement. What was it? You can take a couple insults, but it's not the one thing. It's cumulative. It builds up over time. And if you don't do anything about it, eventually some people break. And they turn it inward and you get suicide, or they turn it outward and you get Columbine.
Yeah.
It's not usually that dramatic. I mean, but some people just break. They just don't interact. They don't pursue things. They just try to stay invisible.
Yeah, even the people who don't break, they basically just are miserable. And yeah, the danger of it is, and this is true in the real world, and this is true in online spaces as well, is that there are a lot of people, even people who don't necessarily engage in the bullying themselves, but who make excuses for it by just treating it like it's a natural state. You know, like, well, these things are just going to happen. So, you know, you might as well just get used to it and grow a thicker skin and, you know, let it roll off your back like water off a duck's back. And like you said, what that does is that creates an environment where the bully is tacitly condoned, is tolerated, is allowed to keep bullying, and the responsibility for dealing with the problem falls to the victims. And how backwards is it to look at the victims of a behavior and say, well, you guys have to deal with it.
Right.
You know, like, we're not going to help you.
Bully, and finally the person turns around and hits them, and then they get in trouble. It's like this whole Nazi thing, you know, punching Nazis.
He never hit you.
Yeah. It's, you know,
yeah.
It's so upside down and backwards. And I wrote about this the worst bullying I ever saw was in elementary school. And I wrote about, I think I was in first grade at the time, because my sister was a year behind me in school and she doesn't remember this. And if she'd been at the bus stop at the time, she'd remember it. So I've talked about a kid named Bruce. I think he was in like fourth grade. And when you're in first grade, a fourth grader, you know, that's like old big kid, you know?
Yeah.
But this bus stop I was at was a large one. You'd have like 30 or so kids getting on or off at once. And when things got dark, it get ugly pretty quick. The kids hated Bruce, and I never understood why. He was just a target, new kid. I don't understand. But I remember him getting off the bus, and like we get to the stop, and somebody would get in and push him into the seat and block him in so he couldn't get off and run first. This whole thing was coordinated. The bus would stop, people would get off, he'd get off near the end, he'd already be surrounded, and you know, they grab him by the arms. One time they came at him with a pipe.
Jesus Christ.
They found like a metal yeah. And I mean, and they would clobber him. And I honestly, if I hadn't seen it myself, I would never have believed it was possible. I don't know if it was a pipe or if it was a wooden stick. I think it was wood, but I mean, it came at somebody here who talked about the incident. One incident later said there was a lot of blood.
I can imagine if they cracked him with a pipe or
and I mean, there's no way, nothing that a fourth grader could do to warrant that. I mean, there's no explanation. It was 20 on one, and the 20 were armed, and it was a mob, and it was brutal, and it was bloody, and it was a bunch of goddamn elementary school kids. I mean, I recounted it, and I have trouble believing it, and I saw it.
Yeah,
you know, it's like how does that happen? And I don't know that anything. The kid had the reputation as a troublemaker because the administration is going to believe it when 20 kids on the bus blame him for damage that somebody else did. The adults get the impression that he's a liar, that he's a troublemaker. They're going to, and then he was only in the school district there for 1 year, which was probably for the best for him. Hopefully things went better for him elsewhere. But like I said, when I wrote about it, what kind of adult do you think he grew up to be?
Yeah. What kind of formative experience was that? You know, not only being abused and having nobody who had the power to stop it, make an effort to stop it, but then to have people side with the bullies and believe them and make him out to be the villain.
I mean, I still hear him like crying, please, please, as the kids were holding both of his arms in his jacket, and so he couldn't go anywhere. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. I never saw anything that bad when I was in school, but I will agree with you. I had a similar experience in a very general way, in the sense that the only serious bullying in school that I ever witnessed or felt myself was in elementary school. I know a lot of people get it really bad in high school, and personally, I didn't. Like, after elementary, I was bullied by one kid when I was in maybe third or fourth grade. And after that, I was never personally bullied by anybody, and I didn't see a lot of like really serious bullying in my school after that. I mean, although it did happen, there were always, you know, people who, you know, took to that a lot more than other people did.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, for some reason in elementary school, it was so much worse. And I don't know if it's because there's the attitude of, well, they're just kids, and well, what are they really going to do? You know, or it's not that big of a deal. But
Well, it is a big deal when they keep suicide statistics on kids as young as 8.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is true. There are suicides, well, as young as like 8 or 10. I think 10 I saw. They keep suicide statistics on 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah. And which
a 10-year-old,
means
a 10-year-old doesn't just do that on their own.
well, and if they keep statistics of it, that means that it happens enough times that it's worth keeping track of. I mean, it's the very fact that that statistic exists in a way that you can Google it and find out, how many people in the 8 to 10 age bracket committed suicide last year. I mean, that alone
is horrifying.
Enough. Yeah, it's horrifying. And I think go ahead.
My experience was that my experience is once I got into high school, it tended not to be as bad because people got more interested in their own lives as opposed to acting out on others.
Yeah.
Middle school was the worst for me. But it's had to settle down a bit in high school when people got more involved in, in sports and the other sex and their own extracurricular activities and so on. Things, for me at least, settled down a bit at that point. Of course, at that point, I was also like 6 inches taller than everyone else, which might have helped a little bit.
Well, I think with high school, at least in my experience, it shifted a little bit. The underlying social things that maybe contributed to the bullying in elementary school and junior high school were still there, but instead of causing people to bully others, it just sort of manifested itself in, if you weren't part of the in-group, then you just kind of became alienated.
Oh.
You weren't, yeah, exactly. You weren't necessarily, nobody outright abused you, but there was very definitely like a social pecking order. And there were the cool people at the top, the athletes, the people who were involved in like student government or people who had, who came from prominent families. And then the people underneath that, they weren't necessarily bullied, but they weren't exactly treated all that well either, and they were sort of left out.
Yeah, right. I've written about my experience. I don't want to go into all of that here. I don't want to just read the thing I wrote. I mean, you remember I wrote that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the person I'd written about, Joe, who was a problem for me, somebody had written said somebody else, Joe, had just decided the kid's name was Monkey Boy. Every time I call him Monkey Boy, I don't know. See him scruff his hair, call him Monkey Boy. And I mean, is that bullying? Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's not especially violent, but it's the sort of thing that will wear on you, especially if you don't appreciate it or want it. It's you just decided that was the name, and that was always going to call him. Well,
and that brings up another issue with this, which is that very often we allow the bullies to define what bullying is. To like bullying.
Give him a nickname. Everyone has nicknames.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, bullying should be you should ask the victim. You shouldn't ask the perpetrator. Right. I mean, again, it's backwards from how it usually. People on
Fox News say no racial issues.
Exactly. Like, well, why are we asking them? It's not their deal. Like,
then say I've never been a victim of sexism.
Yeah, and that's how.
Except for the Wonder Woman showing.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I can't believe it. There's one screening of a movie that I won't be able to go to. Actually, two, because the tickets sold out, so they had to schedule another one. The free market at work.
I refuse to watch an action movie with women. This Ghostbusters remake sucks. All right, women on the show Wonder Woman. What? No fair.
Yeah.
Please.
You didn't want to see it, dude. Like, yeah, I mean, you defer to the people who are responsible for the problem behavior. And they say, "Oh, what were you bullying him?" No, I wasn't bullying him. Well, I don't see the problem. Yeah. You ask the person who has been affected by it. You say, "Are you okay with this?" Because here's the key:
arson never cost me my house.
Exactly. But I mean, if you ask the person who's been affected by it, if you say, "Hey, is what they were doing okay with you?" and they say no, then that's it. Like, that's the end.
But it's easier to look the other way. I mean, when back in when girls in elementary school, middle school, one of them had an item that was stolen by another student, and the principal basically let it slide. He was there for his last year, and he wasn't about to do anything about it. This one student was such a problem that they eventually told the teachers not to send her to the office anymore.
Wow.
They send her to the evidence. She just wandered the halls for like an hour or two and no one did anything about it, which is why when they get to middle school, suddenly it was a whole different world and people start getting in trouble and expelled for behaviors they were getting away with because the person in the middle school or the elementary school wouldn't do anything about it, which is ridiculous, but there it is. It's just, of course, he was also protecting a teacher who was a good friend of his who I remember we always thought he was terrible back. He would do like health and gym and he never really did anything. We thought he was pretty terrible when I was a student there. And then his last year, he was teaching gym. He was trying, I don't know, they're fourth graders. They're not even 10 years old. They can get rambunctious, excited. He was getting frustrated with them. And he actually called a class of fourth graders a bunch of fucking retards.
Jesus.
Principal
the good old
okay
days.
With it. Yeah. But
the good old days.
You learn it in school, that bullying is okay and you see the adults doing it and so it's okay.
I think we've sort of touched on part of the problem with preventing this sort of thing, which is that the people in authority, people who have the responsibility for determining what the environment is, have to take an active role. It's vital to, like, when we're talking about school, it's vital to educate students, right? And to teach students that bullying shouldn't be tolerated, that you shouldn't be a bully, that if you see someone else being bullied, you should do something about it. You should tell somebody about it. That's important. Like, it's important to encourage like peer intervention. That's right. Super, super big.
But peer intervention can't be the beginning and end of it. If you hang up the posters calling for that and then you don't do anything about it when something does that.
Exactly.
Then it's just words written on a wall.
Exactly. You have to devote time and resources to dealing with the problem. You can't just teach the kids how they're supposed to deal with it and then just let them go and say, well, we told them what to do. Like you have to take an active role, because if you are a teacher, an administrator, whatever, if you are some way responsible for the environment that those kids are in where the bullying is taking place, then you are responsible for that bullying. If it happens and it continues to happen, especially after you know about it, then that's your fault. It's not entirely your fault because, the bullies are also at fault themselves, but you are responsible for that.
It's a sin of omission instead of a sin of commission. You're not the one who's doing the bullying, but you're letting it happen. You know it's happening and you're in a position to stop it and you're like, meh.
Yeah.
It's easier not to.
And you can kick it up a level.
I turned out fine. There was no empathy for anyone else.
That's the golden excuse. Well, hey, I got bullied. I was fine. Well, how nice for you. It's like
remember their suicide statistics for 10 years old. Not everyone turns out fine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And I remember 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, probably even a little bit longer. When one of the many asinine things that Richard Dawkins has tweeted over the years, he mentioned casually that he was sort of lightly molested as a boy, and whatever the fuck that means, and he turned out fine, and it was like,
a gentle stabbing.
Yeah, like, well, how nice for you. You made it. Okay, I'll take your word for it that it didn't fuck you up at all. Fine. Good for you. What the fuck does that have to do with anybody else? I mean, who could possibly argue? How could you be so lacking in empathy that you could describe surviving what for other people would be a horrifying, life-changing experience and say, yeah, but I made it through okay. So, I mean, I don't really see what the big deal is.
Well, so many of the problems that we have fundamentally come down to a lack of empathy for other people. You see this a lot you see a lot from both sides of the spectrum, but you do see a lot of conservatives do not care about an issue unless it affects them or their family personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't see Nancy Reagan saying anything about medical research and so on until Ron had the Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. Dick Cheney was every horrible conservative position except gay rights because his daughter was gay and so it affected his family, so he cared about that one. We didn't give a shit about anything else. If it affects you, you care. If it affects other people, well, they should just get over it.
Yeah,
So much
exactly.
of the lack of empathy for other people is where so many of these problems come. It's the fundamental thing that they all have in common.
Yeah, it's the if you can imagine yourself in the other person's situation, and you think I wouldn't want that to happen to me, then you shouldn't be okay with it happening to them either.
And why is that such a complicated, impossible concept for so many people?
Yeah, or and the thing is, you don't even, in many cases, you don't even have to do that. All you have to do is listen to the people who are actually in that situation. If someone is being bullied or harassed or abused, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter if you think, well, that if that happened to me, I wouldn't care, or that has happened to me and I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That's irrelevant. If that person over there who is experiencing it says, I'm not okay with this, I want this to stop, then that's it. Then you should, then that's the side you should be on. You shouldn't be on the side of the person who is doing the thing that they don't want them to do.
Like a person who's in tears over how they've been treated and say, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah, that accomplishes nothing. I mean, and there, I mean, I will look, I admit there is a certain ruthless practicality to telling people to grow a thicker skin, or to encouraging people to maybe cultivate a little bit more resilience, because it is true, if you are not as powerfully affected by things emotionally as other people are, then it will be easier for you to weather these things if they happen to you. But
That
it's
doesn't
still
mean
not,
those things should be happening in the first place.
no, exactly. It's still not your responsibility. And not everybody can do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody has a thick skin or the potential to have a thick skin. Some people feel things very deeply and very immediately, and there's nothing wrong with that. People are just different, just as they're physically different. People are emotionally and mentally different as well. And it's not their fault if they're too sensitive, whatever that means. It's not their fault if they let things get to them, whatever that means. It may be true, if they didn't let things get to them, that they would have an easier time, but that's not the point. It's not their responsibility.
That's dealing with the effect, not the cause.
Yeah, exactly. That's why
It's saying abuse is okay. It's your fault if you get abused and it bothers you.
yeah, exactly. And that's why I mean, when I have talked about online abuse in the
Because
past,
that's where this continues from. You learn in school that this is okay. You witness it. You don't get in trouble for it. You go out in the adult world and you continue to bully, and you continue to treat people that way. And if you've got a lot of money, you put together entire networks dedicated entirely to bullying people who don't agree with you.
exactly. And you bully because either you've never been told that you're not allowed to do that, you've never been told that it's wrong, or that you're at liberty to do it. No one's going to stop you. Or even worse, you have found yourself in a situation where you may be positively rewarded for it.
Oh yeah.
And those spaces exist in the real world, and they definitely exist on the internet, where you can cultivate your own space that you are essentially in complete control of, where you will be rewarded for picking on people.
You got to admit that this society of the internet, the culture on the internet, is slowly deteriorating under the weight of bullying. And it's most of the social areas, the interaction is largely poisoned by this sort of behavior. This YouTube and Facebook and so on have created a culture, created a business model where they are bullying is profitable. It's based on number of views. If you can, like TV, it appeals to the lowest common denominator. YouTube channels that appeal to the lowest common denominator, that consist of abuse and punching down and attacking other people, get a lot of views and trying to be very profitable. And so while there are officially policies against that, it's just words written on the wall because nobody's enforcing it.
Exactly. And enforcing it would require people in the company, people who have as part of their job, as what they get paid for, enforcing those rules. I mean, YouTube, for example, if you look at the community guidelines on paper, it looks pretty good. On paper,
guidelines is a problem.
Yeah. Exactly. On paper, you're not allowed to make videos attacking other people. You're not allowed to make
Okay.
videos. You're not
And
allowed to.
thankfully, nobody has ever made a video attacking you
Thank
because
goodness, right?
it's
Because
not allowed.
and no, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to degrade other people. You're not allowed to make content for the purpose of humiliating someone. You're not allowed to make content containing hate speech. I mean, on paper,
I can think of a number of YouTubers who probably lose like at least 95% of the videos if that was enforced.
yeah. Oh, they would lose their channels,
Yeah.
and they should. And when I say that, people who do that sort of thing get really mad at me because they don't want to lose their YouTube channels. They don't want to lose their livelihood. But those people,
if your livelihood is based entirely on hurting other people, your livelihood deserves to be destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, nobody told you to start a YouTube channel bullying people. Nobody told you to become a professional troll. I don't think. I'm pretty sure you decided to do that. No, like nobody came to my house and said, "Hey, you have a YouTube channel now." I'm pretty sure I started mine all on my own, and I'm pretty sure I have complete control over what content I make. You know, I mean, but there's, because it's been so permissive for so long, because the internet has been the Wild West for so long, there are people of all ages. It's not just kids. A lot of it is kids. A lot of it is teenagers and young adults, but a lot of it is people our age and even older who have just become accustomed to being able to say and do whatever they want. And when you bring up, you know, maybe people who continually violate the community guidelines and the terms of service that they agreed to abide by when they started their channel, maybe they should just not have a channel anymore. Maybe they should just be banned from the service because they've grossly violated the rules that they agreed to uphold. When you say that, people flip out and start crying censorship and start crying, you know, end of free speech, when all you're saying is, if you break the rules repeatedly, maybe you should just be kicked the fuck out.
Right. And YouTube and Facebook do have policies for reporting things, but it tends to be less on content and more on number of complaints, which means that the professional bullies can get their people to line up behind them and get opposing viewpoints taken down, not because they're right or wrong, but because they can shout louder and be more of a nuisance.
And exactly.
There was something that was on Facebook recently that I thought was somebody had their channel suspended for 30 days, and basically what it boiled down to was they were getting hate messages, abuse, threats. They reported them to Facebook. Facebook didn't do anything. They said, this does not violate our terms of service. So she said, okay. She posted them and said, these are things that have been said to me.
Yeah.
People complained about that. She got her account suspended for violating the terms of service on Facebook for posting things that they said didn't violate it, because it was a number of people who complained.
Yeah, exactly. So much of it
that is insane. That is a classic example of supporting the bully and hurting the victim.
Yeah, because
bullies are defended.
Because a lot of the system is automated. A lot of the system is a human being doesn't necessarily look at it. And if you get above a certain threshold of reports, the suspension kind of automatically kicks in.
What should happen is, and it doesn't, but what should happen is, at the very least, if it gets to that threshold, it doesn't suspend you. It goes to a human being to review it before you get suspended. But you know what? It's a way to help avoid accountability. We have a system in place, and then if it screws up, well, we didn't do anything wrong. It's just a system, and we corrected it as soon as we found out. And that way they can pretend to avoid any sort of responsibility for what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, the frustrating thing is that there are certain areas of enforcement where the particular big mainstream social media platforms do a pretty good job. And if they would just expand how they operate in those areas out to the entire thing, it would be a huge improvement. Like in my experience, I have had to report people on Twitter frequently for impersonation, because they take my profile pic, they take my background, they take my name or some slight variation of my name, and they make a fake account. And whenever somebody, and I don't go looking for it, but I have friends who they might notice, because some of these people are such dipshits that they'll actually follow people that I follow to basically like, yeah, tell my friends that you're making a fake account about me. I'm sure they won't mention anything. So whenever I hear about it, I always report it. Because I mean, where's the rule that says I have to put up with that? If I find out somebody's impersonating me on a social media platform, I report it immediately. And most of the time, like 9 times out of 10, it gets taken down within a matter of hours. Like Twitter is very good at enforcing their no impersonation policy.
Right.
They're terrible at virtually everything else about enforcing their harassment policy. I've reported people.
As long as you can threaten to rape someone as long as you do it under your own account and not pretending to be someone else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are people on Twitter who have tweeted rape threats to government officials and had their followers respond in kind and tweet thousands and thousands of rape threats to government officials, and nothing was done. But
that's hard to believe.
Yeah, it is. It's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. But if someone pretends to be someone else, and the person they're pretending to be can prove it and reports it, then that person is gone in a matter of hours. So why can you do such a great job at enforcing that, but you do such a terrible job at enforcing the other thing, which is just as against the rules?
And is worse on a lot of fronts. And a lot of moral and ethical standards, it's a much worse offense.
Yeah, and yet nothing is done. Or if something is done,
you're threatening to harm or kill another human being. That meets the definition of terroristic threats.
Yeah, it's just it boggles the mind. And the other problem is that Twitter has been shown capable of effectively enforcing its rules by just removing problem people from the platform permanently, which is the only way to deal with the problem. Just people who do this all the time should just be banned, and they're not here anymore. That's how you fix it. Ultimately, you take away the people who do it. And they've shown that they're capable and they're willing to do that. But
only intermittently.
Yeah, exactly. Only intermittently. And the target of the harassment has to be high profile enough that they can draw attention to it from outside Twitter and make it an embarrassment to Twitter.
When news comes out that people who appear in the Ghostbusters rig and so on, when people are deleting their Twitter accounts to get away from the abuse on the platform, that should be some sort of warning sign there. That should indicate that you've got a fundamental problem that you need to deal with. And but again, it's one of those things where nobody stands up to the bullies. Nobody in power wants to do anything about it. It's like, bully, not my problem. And so it continues.
Yeah. And
feeds itself.
People online, their online platforms have given individual people more control. It's like on Twitter, it's easier to control your notifications now. Like you can set your Twitter account so that you'll only receive notifications from people that you follow. So if you are getting a lot of shit from a particular group of people, you can just basically mute them all at once, and you'll only get notifications from people you follow.
The only problem is those things are still there, and Twitter's not doing it about, but at least you don't have to see it, which is like the only slightly above doing nothing at all.
Exactly. It makes the experience of using Twitter a lot easier, and it makes those episodes easier to weather, but it doesn't do anything to address the underlying problem.
It'd be looking at Flint, Michigan, trucking and water. It's like, okay, that's great, but we still have a fundamental problem here that's not being addressed.
Yeah, exactly. And like YouTube has improved its blocking system over the years. Blocking on YouTube used to be basically the same as muting someone, where you wouldn't actually block them. You would if you blocked somebody, it just meant that you couldn't see what they were saying. But they could still
saying it on your wall.
They were still saying it, and now they changed that. Now it's different. But there are other things that YouTube could do that they haven't done that they probably could implement fairly easily, like giving channel owners the right to close comments on older videos without deleting all the comments, or set a character limit so that people can't post like a fucking graduate paper in the comment section, like stuff like that I would turn on like today if I had that option. If I could put on like a 500 character limit for my comments and say, you can only comment on a video for 2 weeks and then it's closed to comments, I would do that immediately. I think a lot of people would, and it would help a lot. But again, that doesn't address the underlying problem. The underlying problem is that there are people on the platform who have been able to earn profitable livings by just outright abusing people, and the platform does nothing about it. The platform allows them to continue to do it.
Well, that's our entire system. I mean, if you take somebody who is abusive and cruel and is accusations of sexual assault against him and cheats business owners and so on, that man can become president of the United States. There were reports of the bullying that Trump had done during the campaign, and people defended it. Somebody I'm friended with posted something one time about, this is for people who are under the impression that Trump mocked a disabled reporter. There's no under the impression. He did it. You can make a case that he didn't mock him because he was disabled, because he's mocked other people similarly. It doesn't change the fact he was very clearly mocking that reporter.
Yes, exactly.
And that's publicly bullying. And hey, he's president now.
Yeah, and I love that,
and that's brought so many others out of the woodwork. Because I mean, what higher? I can't come up with the word. What higher basis? What more justification can you have for bullying than to see that you can get the highest office in the land by bullying your way to the top?
Yeah, and that nobody will do anything to stop you. I mean, even people that the most that happened to Trump during the campaign was that people paid lip service to that he was doing something bad.
Well, at least now he's finding out that government does not work like a business. You can't just shut everyone down. There are checks on your power, and there are people who are not going to be loyal to you that you can't necessarily get rid of.
Yeah, and yeah, you can't just try to open secret communications with foreign powers, and then when the intelligence officials find out about it, just ask them not to look into it.
Yeah,
which is almost sweetly naive. When these reports come out that he was.
It would be cute if it wasn't so tragic that the United States is basically being led by people who are under the power of a hostile foreign country, and nobody seems to give a shit.
Yeah, it's like.
Are we in 5 minutes of Trump yet, or did we?
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, but you're right. I mean, how can what more powerful example can there be of what happens when you reward people for that kind of behavior than the Trump administration? Where everybody kept making excuses. And, well, if he won't get elected. Well, if he gets elected, then he'll change. He'll have a more adult temperament.
That's how relationships work. You go into based on who you think they can become.
Yeah, we're going to change him. We're going to change him. It'll be fine. And now here we are. And if you look at anybody who doubts that this is a problem online, go to the YouTube channel of any prominent woman who talks about social issues, who talks about social justice, who talks about in favor of feminism or Black Lives Matter or whatever. Look at the comment section of a Francesca Ramsey video or a Cat Black video or whatever, and you tell me that it's not a fucking sewer, that it's just a cesspool of abuse.
Your page on Rational Wiki has a link to your Facebook post where you posted some of the crap on YouTube that gets through the filters that you have set up.
Yeah.
You did a Facebook post where you posted 10 or 15 screen caps of just abuse. And that's what gets through your filters, which you have set certain keywords just get blocked automatically.
Yeah. Which
unfortunately does end up blocking some people who shouldn't be, but it's something you sort of have to do. It's a compromise you make to not lose your sanity dealing with all this crap.
Yeah.
And because the stories about your block list are somewhat legendary. But and on one hand, there are times when I wonder if it might be a bit much, but you have to do what's right for you. And I'm thinking to myself, if somebody if you post a video about women's rights or minority rights or transgender rights, and you're saying that people deserve the same treatment under law, same treatment in society, and somebody responds, "What a load of crap! These people aren't even human. Screw you."
Yeah.
Where could the conversation possibly go from there that it would be a conversation worth having?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then they get upset that you won't debate with them. Well, there's nothing to debate if you are not taking people's basic right to exist as a human being as a fundamental given, then you don't have enough common ground to debate anything.
Well, not only that, but
and those who don't want to debate, like I said, they want to be able to get some clips of you they can take out of context to continue bullying and harassing you.
Yeah, exactly. Because doing that, not just to me, but to a lot of people, doing that is profitable.
Right.
Because it's easy. You don't have to have any talent to do that. You don't even have, I mean, you can make a 30-minute video where you're only actually on camera for 5 minutes, because most of the content is someone else's content.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't have to write anything.
You don't even have to take a position. You're just trash somebody.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like what 9/11 truthers do. You don't have to come up with anything on your own. All you have to do is make it look like the person you're responding to is wrong, or could possibly be wrong, or doesn't know what they're talking about, or whatever, or is a fool, or whatever.
Because the 9/11 truthers in quotes, cannot come up with a single cohesive explanation of what actually happened. They say that what we're told happened didn't, but there's no cohesive story about what actually happened, and no goal where it would make any sense for them to do this.
No, and
how is this the easiest way to accomplish the goal? Well,
yeah, why would anybody have?
I read there was one thing that somebody was doing a 9/11 truther thing, go ranting and raving, and they actually made the claim that planes did not actually hit the buildings.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one.
How do you deny that planes hit the buildings? I mean, and they have the whole thing where they landed and they took the crew off and they killed them. How is that simpler than they died in the plane crash?
Yeah, it's ludicrous. Well, and the point to make about that tied in with like the sense of entitlement and the sense of, especially entitlement to a conversation and a debate from people who are abusive online. If a conference of like engineers or historians refused to invite a 9/11 truther to address their conference, or if a conference of biologists refused to allow a creationist to address their conference, nobody except for creationists or 9/11 truthers would have a problem with that.
Right.
Because everybody would recognize, oh, those people are just kooks. They're crackpots. Yeah. There's no reason to take them seriously.
If you got some sort of astronomers convention and she wants to show up and make the case that there's no stars up there, it's a giant field of marshmallows. Yeah. You're not going to invite them because you're
not going to invite. Exactly. But for some reason, if somebody is a racist or a misogynist, it's like, oh, well, if we don't let them talk, it's a violation of free speech. Really?
Basically, if you're defending that, you're basically saying that you kind of agree with what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
not necessarily explicitly, because a lot of bullying is looking the other way on it, and school administrators not doing anything. A lot of this comes from people who are very passive about it and allow things to happen instead of, it's like they're not actively making it worse, but they're doing absolutely nothing to make it better. They're allowing the situation to deteriorate.
And a lot of it, even some of the people who are directly responsible for the bullying, people who whip up the Twitter harassment campaigns or make the videos, they may well sincerely believe that they're not doing anything wrong, but that's not the point.
But you think that people running Twitter, when they see the phrase coordinating Twitter harassment campaign, they should be like, gee, maybe we should step in here.
Yeah, maybe this because we have a rule that says you're not allowed to do this. Maybe we should step in. Well, and it doesn't matter what you think of it. Your intentions are not the entire issue. Also at issue is the impact of your actions. And if what you are doing hurts somebody, or you are doing something to somebody else that they don't want you to do, then it doesn't matter whether you didn't mean it or not. You're still hurting the other person. And if you choose to continue to do it, you are choosing to continue to hurt another person. And your supposed good intentions at the outset mean absolutely nothing. I don't make abusive content. That's just not what I've never made a video targeting a specific other YouTuber. I've never made a video with another YouTuber's name in the title. I've never made a video with another YouTuber's picture in the thumbnail. I've never made a video that I feel anyone who watches it would get the impression that they should go and give someone else shit because of something I said. I don't do that. I'm not interested in it. I think it's just not my cup of tea.
Now heading in beneath you.
Yeah. It's
like,
yeah.
I might have behaved like that at one time, but then I turned 8.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just not what I do. I prefer to, I don't know. It's wacky, I know, but I like to do original content. Stuff that I came up with all on my own. But if that's what you do, and you see that people who watch your videos are going after the people that you're making videos about. At a certain point, your intentions become meaningless and it becomes your responsibility to do something about it. I remember a couple years ago, I got a comment on a video that I had made. It was about something to do with trans equality or transphobia or something. And I used the T word, the T slur, as an insult to trans people. And I didn't use it in earnest. I used it as a joke. Like I was speaking in the voice of someone who was being abusive to trans people. And I got a comment from someone saying, you know, I know that you didn't, that you weren't saying it, you know, maliciously, but you don't use any other slurs that way. You know, like you don't say the N word and ironically, you don't say the F slur about gay people ironically. So why are you saying this word about trans people? And I thought, shit, you're right. Yeah. You know, and I haven't said it since. And I've made an effort in my writing in general to avoid doing that, you know, to be like, if I can.
See, that's positive feedback. That's somebody who's responding to you, but they're not just trying to shit all over you. They're saying, yeah, here's a point, and here's why I think that this might not be a good thing for you to do. You know, it's backed up by something. There's an actual point to it. It's not tearing you down. It's saying you can do better.
And my good intentions were irrelevant, because I mean I could have dug in my heels and gotten defensive and said, well, that's not how I meant.
Many do.
Yeah, and I've done it before. You know,
we all do.
Yeah, it's part of human nature. But the key is to figure out how to get past that, and to understand that if you say something that hurts another person, even if you didn't mean it, you should still probably stop. You know, I mean, there are certain cases you can't avoid offending everybody. No matter what you say, you're always running the risk that you're going to hurt somebody's feelings, or you're going to say something that, you know, will be received differently than you intended it, or be received in a way that you didn't anticipate. Like that's, you know,
isn't that kind of fundamentally what the issue was with Jon Stewart and Wyatt Cenac on the Daily Show?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great example. Wyatt Cenac said, you know, when like, don't do the black voice.
Yeah. And
Jon Stewart basically said, well, I don't mean anything by it. I'm making fun of people who are bad people. And Wyatt basically said, well, I don't care. You know, like that's not the point. And I kind of took Wyatt's side on that. As much as I love Jon Stewart, he's a genius, but you know, I think Wyatt was right.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that I try not to do. You know, like if I do a voice where I'm voicing like it's such a little thing, but I think it makes a difference. Like when we, you know, sometimes we'll like quote movies or something, and if you're quoting a line that was said in a movie by a character that was played by a black actor, it's very, very easy without realizing it to go into like an offensive black voice. And if you just make a little bit of
It's weird how easily you can fall into an accent or some sort of characteristic. When I was working at the insurance company at one point, it was a Saturday, and the one was mortified. One of my coworkers got a call from like somebody with a heavy Indian accent calling to cancel the policy, and without realizing it, she started going into his same accent in what she was saying to him. And she was listening to the recording, and she was mortified. And she was laughing out of sheer embarrassment. She didn't mean to. She didn't even realize she was doing it. Yeah. But called in speaking with the accent, and she started responding in the same accent, and that the person would have had every right to be infuriated by that. And I think she realized that she was kind of she was just laughing out of sheer embarrassment. She could not believe that she did that. But these things, you know, it's something you have to be aware of, and you can't just say, "Oh, well, I didn't mean anything by it," because that's something that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Saying I didn't mean anything by it is like the get out of jail free card that people try to cash in. And it just doesn't work that way.
People use that in doxing people.
Yeah. I didn't mean it. Well, so the fuck what?
Yeah. Well, how was I supposed to know that if this person's name and address got out, that people would harass her just like they've done every other time I've done this?
Yeah, exactly. Well, like there was somebody who was affiliated with one of the shitty channels on YouTube who took. We
won't mention names. We all know what we're talking about.
I won't mention names.
The 3 or 4 top ones.
Just write them all down and throw a dart, and it'll probably be one of those. But you know, where one of them took, they encountered Anita Sarkeesian, like out in the wild, like out in public somewhere.
Yeah.
And they took a picture of her without her knowing.
As you said, out in the wild, and I'm picturing across the plains of the Serengeti.
She was camping. And they took a picture of her without her knowing that her picture had been taken. And then they tweeted it to their following, and included like where she was and what she was doing when this picture was taken. And understandably, a lot of people who were not fans of theirs and their shitty show that does shitty things to people got really angry and said, that's a really fucked up thing you did, because she is targeted by harassment already. And she's already had like death threats and had to call the cops and stuff. And now you're basically tweeting your following of people who are the exact kind of shitty people that bully her. And you said, hey, look who I found and look where she is. That's a really fucked up thing you just did. And their excuse was basically, well, I didn't mean anything by it. You know, well, she's out in public. Well, I didn't, you know, it's not my fault.
Why don't you tweet where you are and what you're doing?
Yeah. Like it's just the utter lack of, the hypocrisy and just the lack of personal responsibility, the lack of, look, it doesn't matter whether you intended to do anything bad or not, which I don't even believe. I don't even believe that their motives are that pure. But even if their motives are that pure, you're still a piece of shit for doing it. It doesn't matter whether you were so naive that you didn't think it was a bad thing you were doing. You still did it, you know? So, I mean, there's a lot of people who are guilty of perpetuating the problem, the abuse problem in online spaces and in real life spaces. They hide behind their supposedly pure intentions. They demand that we accept at face value that they didn't mean anything, and that we absolve them of whatever guilt that they may have earned because they honestly didn't mean anything.
Right. And I mean, and then people get chased off the internet. We lose voices showing other perspectives and things that we could stand to learn. And the bullies run the asylum. Yeah,
exactly. And
they're being hounded right off the internet. You know, different YouTube channels have disappeared based on abuse. People are afraid to stand up. And until people in charge with enough power to do something about it stand up to the bullies too, it's not going to change.
Oh yeah, I mean, people that I know personally that I'm still friends with have closed their YouTube channels explicitly because they were tired of putting up with the abuse. Like they say that's the reason they did it. Lindy West, who is a brilliant, incredibly funny writer, left Twitter and the reason she left Twitter, as she wrote in the article that she published after she left, it wasn't because of the abuse that she personally received. It was because Twitter refused to do anything about it. And Twitter allowed itself to not only, have an environment where people like her were being abused, but also where like white supremacists were able to gather and rally and recruit. And Twitter is basically okay with it, And she said, you know what, if you're going to be okay with actual like Nazis, like real no-fool and neo-Nazis are using your platform to communicate with each other and spread their message, and you're not doing anything about it, well, then I'm out of here. And if I could have afforded to do that, I would have been out of there too. If I had a full-time job as a writer, or it's sort of the trap that you fall into, or if you're in my position where Twitter offers you an opportunity to reach a potentially much larger audience at any given moment. You almost have to do that calculus of saying, well, maybe it's worth sticking around, even though it's a shithole. Whereas, if I had 1 million YouTube subscribers and I didn't really need Twitter for anything, and I was catching a lot of shit from people on Twitter, or I saw that Twitter was completely indifferent to hate groups proliferating on it, it would be very easy to say, okay, well, who needs this?
I've never actually gone onto Twitter. I haven't really had anything that I've wanted to shoot out into the void that I can say in 140 characters at a time.
That's why you use the tweet storm. Oh, geez. You just tweet like 20 different things.
Was that I like the one thing where somebody said, I explained to my grandfather about Twitter, but his counter argument of why on earth would I want to do that was pretty ironclad.
Exactly. I mean, it is, before I got on Twitter, I kind of felt the same way. I was like, why the fuck do you want to limit it to 140 characters?
Yeah,
but now it's just part of what I do.
Yeah.
It's like writing a haiku.
That's one way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you feel like we've picked this subject?
Pretty much. We've got almost a full hour on it at this point.
Yeah. It sucks. And the people that have the power to do anything about it aren't really doing that much about it. So here we are.
Yeah, you sort of at a point where you either have to endure it or leave, which is two terrible options.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, people say, well, just get off the internet. Oh, man, fuck you, Dr. Phil. Like, I'm the victim. I'm not going to get off the internet. People keep shooting me on my way to work. Well, just pick a different way to work. Well, no, that shouldn't be my responsibility.
Yeah, the victim is always at fault in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of victims, let's talk about, let's take 5 minutes here and see, I did a segue.
I was thinking that was coming a little bit smoother than the last one.
Let's take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Let me call up my timer. I still don't have an on-screen timer, but I will. No, I suck.
Well, at least you didn't delegate that responsibility to Pierre.
Right. Let's take 5 minutes and talk about the real victim here. The victim of the greatest witch hunt in American history, the person who has been treated worse than any politician ever.
Yeah, because just like the other, treated worse than the politicians who were dragged out, their bodies were dragged through the streets.
I mean, even in America, I'm pretty sure a few have been murdered. Like, you have to figure Lincoln was treated worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but anyway, the guy
who put up with a bunch of crap before things went bad for him. Come on.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, so let's take 5 minutes and talk about Donald Trump, shall we?
All right. You want to start, or should I talk about the?
Timer's running, so you go for it.
The thing I mentioned before we started here about an argument about the Trump administration that I've heard people make, and I kind of agree with, but I don't want to make it myself.
Yes.
Has to do with the claim that it's going to work out better in the end, because the White House has not been held by the same party for more than 12 years straight since FDR won 4 elections in a row. More than 12 years just doesn't happen. It goes back and forth. And in the grand scheme of things, the 2020 election is going to be more important than the 2016 election in terms of the years of the tens. That has to do with redistricting, with adjusting the congressional maps, and where we have a lot of problem with gerrymandering, where there are states who have like 10 out of 13 representatives are Republican, even though the Democrats overall got more votes in the state because it's so heavily gerrymandered.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, if Hillary had won in 2016, odds are she wouldn't have won in 2020 because she was never an especially inspiring choice anyway.
Right.
I mean, she was so uninspiring she managed to lose to Trump.
If she only in electoral votes.
Yeah, well, true. But she still lost the election, yes.
Yeah.
But if she had won in 2016, odds are the Republican candidate would have won in 2020. We would have had the same issue with the gerrymandering, with the very social issues that come along with this, as far as gay rights, trans rights, and so on. And people have said, pointed this out and said, if Trump winning in 2016 really increases Democrats' chances in 2018, 2020, is going to work out in the end. I can't make that argument because it doesn't justify what happens. You can make the argument, short-term pain for long-term gain, but it's a pretty callous argument to make when you're the one who's not going to be paying the bulk of the short-term pain. I'm not the one who has to worry about being deported because of the color of my skin, or being shot by police, or being detained at the airport repeatedly simply because of what I look like. Yeah. I'm not somebody who has, as a gay person or transgender person, who has not just my identity, but my right to exist brought into question.
Right.
The fundamental right to exist is denied in some people's heads. I'm not the one who has to worry about these things. I don't have the right to say, it's going to work out in the end. Sorry, you're never going to see your family again.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, I've seen that multiple times, and there is truth to that, but I can't justify what's happening based on that, because that's a silver lining on a cloud. But the cloud is still there. You have to deal with this. Just because it's going to work out potentially better in the long run, redistricting and so on, it doesn't make any of what's happening right or acceptable.
No, and all of those problems like gerrymandering and voter suppression, like those are problems that could have and should have been dealt with whether Trump won or not. I mean, it's not as if Trump winning is creating some opportunity that wasn't there before. It's just a matter of will. If we had had our ducks in a row, if we had had our shit together, we could have done something about gerrymandering and voter suppression and police brutality and immigration reform and all of these other things, no matter who won the election, because those are the problems exist no matter what. There was a lot of people who said like, I hope Trump wins because then it'll be chaos and then we'll have to really have some real reform. And like, you spoiled piece of shit. How spoiled can you possibly be when you think, it doesn't really matter what Trump does because I'll be okay.
Right.
So I'll be okay in 2 years or 4 years.
But those are the people who also insist that there's no such, they don't benefit from being white.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you do. If you said that you were okay if Trump won because you think that it'll be better in the long run, you benefit from being white, buddy.
Yeah. There's no white privilege. Also, Trump isn't going to hurt me. He's just going to hurt everyone. That's a thing that's been very common. It's like I supported Trump's policies till I realized they were going to hurt me too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I didn't think he was going to take away my health care. Oh, well, welcome aboard, I guess.
Yeah. It's hard to, it's one of those things where you have the split thing. I have the split feeling where,
30 seconds, by the way.
Okay. Where it's like, you know what? You were dumb enough for this. You deserve to have your health care taken away, but the people who voted against him don't.
Yeah, because it's going to be everybody.
It's a basic humanity thing where even though you deserve to take it away, it still shouldn't really happen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an empathy for other people, unlike you.
Well, yeah, it's like I don't even think that I think even Richard Spencer should have health care. I mean, I don't.
He'll need it with how much he's getting punched.
Yeah, I wouldn't care if he got the shit kicked out of him every time he left his house, but he should be able to go to a doctor afterwards.
Right. Are we at 5 minutes?
That's it. We talked about Trump for 5 minutes.
We're done.
We're done. It's amazing how easy it is, isn't it?
It's amazing how quickly it passes when you're venting at somebody who does so much crap wrong that you just we didn't even get into we didn't mention the European trip at all.
His Ugly American 2017 World Tour.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Oh, so moving on. We usually wrap up with something frivolous. We've done online abuse. We've done Trump. We should do something a little bit lighthearted to go on a positive note here.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the Phillies because they've only won like 6 games this month.
Oh. What'd you think of the Star Trek Discovery trailer?
What I saw of it, I liked. I mean, it's hard to tell much about a show from a trailer.
Yeah.
And I think that the fervor over it is insanity. It's ludicrous that people are this bent out of shape over women being in lead roles, especially on Star Trek. Of course, these are the same people who are upset that you had a woman and a black person as the 2 main leads in the new Star Wars film. And it's like, what? If you're that upset by this, you deserve to be upset by it. And you deserve to suffer. Yeah, exactly. I hope if this is what's bothering you,
I hope the next Star Trek show is nothing but black transgender lesbians.
No white people at all.
I don't even care if it's a good show. I'll watch every episode because I know it'll piss you motherfuckers off.
But it's so hard to tell. And I mean, and then there's the minor details. Like it takes place in the Prime universe, not the movie universe, which is one of those things. Like, why would you make it that confusing? Just put it in the same thing, and you can cross over, and you're fine. But I mean, that's not the sort of thing to get bent out of shape over either. That's tiny little detail. It doesn't affect the stories at all. No,
and I mean, I sort of have to keep in mind that not every Trek fan thinks the way I do, but like I personally don't give a shit. I mean, I do not care. When I heard that there was going to be a new Star Trek show when they first announced it like 2 years ago, that the first question I had was not, what universe is it going to be set in? I could not care less whether it, because people were, that's one of the other criticisms, the people who are criticizing it for stuff that was actually in the trailer as opposed to like the diversity of the cast. They say like, well, supposedly it's set in the Prime universe, but it looks like the Abrams verse. I mean,
that's because production values have changed over 50 years.
Yeah, and I mean, technically speaking, the J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek movie, if you want to get technical, starts in the Prime universe. because the event that split the timelines is Nero arriving, and so when the first ship appears in J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek, it has the redesigned look. The uniforms look different. The view screen is a window instead of a monitor.
People say that they're like, the uniforms look different. It's like, yeah, because Star Trek has never changed the uniforms before. The next generation, they have like 4 different iterations of the uniform in 7 years.
And it's sort of like, I mean,
this is what you're upset about. It could be the greatest story ever, and you complain the uniforms don't look right.
It's the Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing. Just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. You should really just relax. I mean, like, okay, I get people might be a little upset because the Klingon makeup looks different. If the Klingons are well written and played by good actors, I don't give a shit.
Yeah. You know what? You have to take the same approach to continuity for something that's been in production this long. You have to take the same approach you do with Doctor Who, where it contradicts itself in places. It's going to happen. There are things like, okay, he did this here, or they had this ability here. That would have solved so many problems elsewhere. We just sort of look the other way, and you just let the stories happen.
Doctor Who the hell cares? I mean, it's like, well, I mean, when Star Trek went from TV to movies for the first time, the Klingons looked completely different.
Oh yeah,
they were unrecognizable, and they didn't even bother to explain that until like they did a 2-parter of Enterprise.
I really wish that they had never bothered to explain that. I love the thing in the Trials and Tribulations where they're on K7 in the original series, so the Deep Space Nine characters, and they're looking around talking about Klingons, and they go, "Those are Klingons." They look at Worf, and he goes, "We do not discuss it with outsiders," and that was it.
Yeah,
They said, "Here's the situation. We are totally not discussing this. Move on." And that was it.
Because everybody knows what the reason is. The reason is that they had more money for makeup and they redesigned the character. That's the reason. That's why the uniforms looked different in First Contact, because they had a budget and they said, let's give them new uniforms. There was no reason.
They even had a redesign they made and didn't use for generations.
Yeah, that's right.
Some of the action figures came out with like colors around the collar and the different uniforms.
Yeah, I remember I had one of those. Yeah. I mean, it just, who cares? Like they're in Generations, which was supposedly, I mean, it was a couple months after the show ended. The bridge looked different. They redesigned the bridge. They had extra science stations. The lighting was completely different.
They turned off like half the lights on the ship. Yeah. And they took out all of the old screens and put in actual monitors that they could change what was on. Because what was there before was like plastic, and parts were light and parts were dark, and they shone light through it. They actually put TV screens in, and
and there wasn't even a line of dialogue to explain it. It was just there. It was as if it had always been that way, because who gives a shit? I mean, honestly, if that is there's a website, a really cool, like, nerdy Star Trek website called X Astris Scientia. That if you want to get into like the
is that like the Memory Prime type thing, just goes into detail on everything?
Yeah. Well, Memory Alpha.
If it was published with Star Trek, on it, it's going to be discussed on that site.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Memory Alpha, I think, is the one you're referencing, and that's like a wiki. That's like the Star Trek wiki, and that's awesome too. But X Astris Scientia it's got, like, diagrams of like the ships and schematics of the bridge, and it goes into all the little like continuity and like the little details that you can't quite reconcile, like things that happened in one episode that contradicted what happened in another episode. And it's really cool, like, if you want to dive into the nerdy stuff of Star Trek. But some of the things that the guy who runs the site gets hung up on are just, it's such
sort of like the Nitpickers Guild, where you're like, are you really upset about that?
Yeah, it's like it's one thing to notice it. It's another thing to think that it's important. Like the fact that when they were making when J.J. Abrams was making his first Star Trek movie, apparently they scaled up the size of the Enterprise. Like, after they designed it, they designed the ship thinking that it would be a certain size if it were real, and then they made a decision at some point in the production process that they wanted the ship to be bigger. So instead of redesigning the whole thing, they just sort of scaled it up. And for some reason, there's something about that doesn't make sense. And you don't notice it at all when you're watching the movie. It has nothing to do with the story. It's completely irrelevant. It's just one of these weird little technical details that if you happen to notice it, you might think that it's something.
And scale on Star Trek has never been especially solid anyway. I mean, watch your Best of Both Worlds and try to figure out how large the Borg ship is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it does, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And
The original series, the Corbomite maneuver, they talk about must be a mile in diameter. The Enterprise looks like this next to this full screen globe.
oh yeah,
And
I
the
mean,
ship and little cube floating in front of it. They say the cube is like however many 1,000 kilometers off, and it's like a stone's throw away. Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
don't
it's like
worry about it.
some of that stuff is cool because I'm a Star Trek nerd. I like to know, it's cool to like, well, gee, how big is the Enterprise? And you get a schematic that tells you like how many yards long it is, and like that's cool. I like knowing that. But if you see something in an episode that seems to contradict that, I mean, who cares? It doesn't matter. Is it a good episode? Did it?
There's the one episode where they go from the bridge to deck 2, and it takes like 50 seconds. The bridge is deck 1.
The bridge is deck 1. Yeah,
it took them, they went 8 feet and it took them 45 seconds,
Yeah, or, my favorite, my favorite, and this is something that like, I don't know if it's ever explicitly resolved on screen at all, but it's one of those little things like with the turbo lift at Ops on Deep Space Nine that doesn't have doors and doesn't have a covering. So when the lift goes down, like, is there just a hole? Is it just the shaft? And what if someone takes a turbo lift down and then someone else needs to leave? Do they have to wait for the elevator?
They never had to. It was always where it needed to be.
Yeah, they exactly. They rode around it. It was always just whenever somebody had to leave, it was always there. They never had to wait for the car to come back up. But I like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like there was never an episode where Chief O'Brien like tripped and fell down the turbo shaft, and they were like, "Oh shit, we should probably do something about that." It was never an issue, although it would have been Chief O'Brien if that had happened to somebody. It would have been him. But it doesn't matter. It's just a cool, fun little thing.
The Star Wars universe, where it doesn't matter if it's a pit with a 5,000-foot drop. There's never a safety railing anywhere to be seen.
Like, we should really have some kind of precaution, right?
I was stunned when I saw in Rogue One when they near the end when she's going out onto the thing, and naturally the controls are stuck way out there because it makes for a good shot. It's not logical at all, and that actually had railings, and I remember, hey, look, there's safety railings. Wow. They're actually struggling because they're so rare in the Star Wars universe.
They must have discontinued those.
Yeah,
because
the Death Star was so over budget, they just cut out the safety railings. They say if you fall, you're a klutz. You got what you deserved.
Yeah, I mean, we go through stormtroopers like toilet paper anyway. Who really cares? Yeah, but I think, I mean, I am.
Yeah, I saw something as far as people nitpick or whatever. How large is a Klingon bird of prey?
Yeah.
Apparently, the fan solution to that is that there's 2 different identical ships of very different scales.
Yeah,
is the only way to defend it.
Yeah, because like when you see them in the Next Generation, they seem like they're about the same size as the Enterprise D most of the time.
Yeah, and then Star Trek 3, I mean, the ship's like 100 feet long.
Yeah,
except when it decloaked in front of the whaling ship, then it was 1,000 miles again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's like the crew size is varies as well. It's like does the crew of a Klingon ship, is there like a couple hundred people, or is it only like 5 guys?
Well, it's a couple hundred when they leave space dock, and then through the assassination engines and so on, there's only 5 when they get back.
They load up with extra people because they know. Yeah, like people want promoted, Yeah, but I mean, I'm naturally optimistic as a Star Trek fan. It's just I've loved it since I was a kid. I want to like it. I see a trailer for a new Star Trek show, and I think, oh, cool, because I just want to see. If it turns out to be a shitty show, that's what it is. I hope not.
Hope it's not Enterprise.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, I mean, I'm of an age now where I'm grown up enough that even if it's not a good show, I still can find things to enjoy about it.
You're not going to go Batman and Robin on it like you did back in the day.
No. I mean, like, because I just watched, my wife and I just watched Voyager all the way through on Netflix. We just got.
I've never done that. I went to get past. I saw all of the first season, and then I saw it intermittently from there.
I mean, I can't honestly say that it's good. It has its moments. Like there are individual episodes here and there that are really good, but overall, I mean, it's just, I can't defend it as a good show. It's what I call perfectly acceptable Star Trek. Right.
Wasn't there something where the one writer from Deep Space Nine came over when Deep Space Nine ended, and he left like in under 2 or 3 weeks? He would ask like, "Okay, I'm writing for this character. What are they motivating by? How would they handle this situation? How would they react?" And the people are like, "I don't know. Write whatever you want." The
Yeah,
characters were all ciphers.
It was Ronald D. Moore. It was
Yeah.
Ronald D. Moore, and who, of course, went on to create the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and was one of the best Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine writers for many years. And yeah, after Deep Space Nine went off the air, he was invited to join the writing staff for Voyager, and yeah, he left in like a month because he realized that he there's actually a really good interview with him if you Google it from years ago, from around the time that he actually joined the show, where he talks about it, and he outlines all of the fundamental problems with Voyager as a show, like really clearly. And like one of the things I remember he said in the interview was, these people are trapped, 70 years from home at high warp, and yet people on the ship act like they expect to be home within a couple of hours. Like there's no sense of hopelessness or homesickness or, despair from anybody. Like the most that you get is
the two crews certainly integrated nicely, didn't they?
Yeah, by the end of the first episode.
Other than one episode where like Tuvok had a simulation what they would do if the Maquis crewman rose up, which turned out to be just another holodeck malfunction episode.
Yeah, it's I mean, and again, it's like most of the time it's not terrible. It's just sort of there. It's pleasant, it's diverting, you can watch it, and you know that nothing that matters, that nothing that happens in this episode will make any difference in the next episode. It's
below
just
threshold.
Yeah. Exactly. Even if something that seems really important happens.
It's like we can get home and then treat the problem, the medical problems, and we're home. Well, no, we can't do that.
The example that I noticed as we were going through it on Netflix was it's actually one of the better episodes, especially from the later seasons. And like season 6, they come up with a way where they can communicate with Starfleet.
I do remember some of that.
Yeah, and it's actually a really good episode. And the moment when they make their first contact with Starfleet in like 6 years, and they realize that they're still lost, but they can talk to people back home, like that.
Admiral Paris said was there.
Yeah, it was Admiral Paris. Yeah, and I'll get to that in a second. Because you brought that up. I wanted to mention that before we and then we'll wrap this up. I don't want to go too long, but
I think we've already gone longer than the other 2 episodes.
Yeah, we've gone longer than the other, but we're talking about Star Trek, so fuck it.
Yeah.
Where
Pierre, we're here.
Yeah, where the moment when they make contact with Starfleet for the first time, it works. Like emotionally, it works. It's a good moment, and everybody seems really moved and really excited that they have this lifeline now that they haven't had, and they don't feel as lost. Like there's a nice moment where Admiral Paris says, "We're looking for you, and we're going to bring you home," and it's like, oh, that really works. And then the next episode, it's like it didn't even happen. Like it doesn't affect anybody. Nobody even mentions it
until the Doctor had his crappy holodeck program.
Yeah, they mentioned it like 4 or 5 episodes down the line, but it's like you couldn't even put a line of dialogue or something in somebody's mouth just to let us know that things are different now, that there's a different mood, that people have more hope than they used to. Like they have this, they create this beautiful moment in the show that totally works, and then the next episode it's like it never even happened. The thing about Admiral Paris. They introduce Admiral Paris, right, who is Tom Paris's father, his estranged father. And they introduce Admiral Paris as the guy who's in charge of the project back on Earth that is talking to Voyager. They could have had that be anybody. There was no reason for that to be Admiral Paris specifically. That could have been anybody, but they made it Tom's father, Admiral Paris. Do you think there was a scene between Tom Paris and his father by the end of that series? There was not. They did not have a single scene together. Not even talking on the screen. And you think in the last episode, right, the final episode, when the ship makes it home, there's at least going to be one scene where like the father hugs his son or something. No, nothing. It's not even mentioned.
A much better way to have wrapped to do that, instead of having the episode end with them approaching Earth, have the build up, have them get home at the beginning of the episode and acclimate and find out that they have become very different from normal Starfleet, and they have to justify things that they did that made perfect sense. That would be a lot more interesting conflict than Janeway versus Borg Queen, which she always tried to sell as a big thing but never pulled off. Because the Borg Queen was like a borrowed arch nemesis. Like Janeway never got her own arch nemesis. She got Picard's leftovers. She got Q and she got the Borg, and those they belong to somebody else. They never bothered creating Janeway her own arch nemesis. I guess I gave up on that after the Kazon didn't work.
Yeah, which they even shit on the Kazon. They had the Seven of Nine made a joke in a later episode where she said, "Yeah, the Borg encountered the Kazon, but they didn't have anything worth assimilating." It's like,
Give me a
God,
break.
well, way to shit on your own villains. Like, you motherfuckers wrote them.
Wow.
You know, they were the main antagonist for the first 2 years of the show.
The Borg are like, yeah, I can't be bothered. That is, of course, that's how you water down a villain.
Yeah.
Whenever a villain shows up and is really good, and you keep bringing them back, they have to get watered down more and more with each appearance, and because you have to keep defeating them, and they become less of a threat.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it happened. It happened to Bane in the Batman comics. It happened to Doomsday
and
in
to
the Superman
KG
comics.
Beast in the Batman.
Yeah. It's like,
Brainiac, after Crisis, when Brainiac showed up in the Superman comics, he became a big thing. Like, his second or third major appearance was a big Superman crossover that they considered doing as that year's complete DC Universe crossover event. Yeah. They didn't, but that was how big of a threat he was. Like 5 years later, he was stopped by an inmate in a mental asylum. It's like they water them down to keep bringing them back, but you can't. If you keep seeing the threat and the threat keeps losing, they're not as much of a threat anymore.
Yeah.
If you want the bad guys to continue to be a threat, they have to win some victories.
Yeah, exactly. But
that's part of the writing. That's part of the thing of writing, that conflict. You have to have conflict. If you create a situation where the hero is in complete control and doesn't have to overcome anything, it doesn't matter how well written it is, it's a boring story.
Yeah, because it's a foregone conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Once you know that, Voyager is going to defeat the Borg, well, I mean, what are we doing here? Let's just skip to that. Like, we know that they're going to beat the Borg, so why not just skip right ahead to the end?
The Borg are a whole rating thing. I remember being so frustrated when I ended up watching an episode simply because the promo showed that the Borg were, which is why they brought the Borg in. But it turned out to be an episode all about shore leave on a planet and Ponfar and and where was it Vorik's brother or whatever, his identical twin cousin who had never been before suddenly showed up. Yeah, they changed one letter in his name, and he's a different character by the same actor.
And then
there's a throwaway line at the end of the episode where he goes, "I have disabled Voyager's transporter, shuttlecraft, and communications because they need to be isolated from the ship." It's like one random lieutenant can do that. Who designed this fucking ship?
How come you're not a major character on the show?
Yeah, they've got the anyone who steals the ship flies away with no problem. It has its "so you've stolen Starship Voyager" tutorial,
right?
It's just. And then at the end, the closing scene was that one shot of the Borg. That was the big surprise at the end of the episode. The twist they put in the preview the week. I said, "Screw it!" And I didn't watch the Borg episode because I was so upset about having to watch that episode. Being tricked into it.
That was one of the things that Ronald D. Moore mentions in that interview is the people making the show didn't care about their own show, and that was pretty much. That was pretty much it for him, because he had just come off of Deep Space Nine, where everybody tried really hard to make it a good show and really were invested in it.
And other than Vic Fontaine and the Ferengi episodes, they generally succeeded.
Yeah. Oh man. And see, because now we're watching Deep Space Nine on Netflix. We're going through that from the beginning, and it's like, I mean, when you watch Deep Space Nine after binging on Voyager, it's even more of a difference. It's like, wow, this is a really good show. There was the episode we just watched the episode from season 3. Meridian, where Dax is going to leave the ship and go join this planet that phases out of the universe every 60 years.
That's not a very good episode.
No, it's not. It's not one of the greatest episodes the show ever did. But there's a scene there where Dax and Cisco say goodbye because they think that Dax is leaving. And as the viewer, that this isn't going to last. That Dax isn't leaving the show because it's like the 4th or 5th episode of the season, and you know intellectually that she's not going to stay on this planet. But that scene has so much emotional depth to it because you feel like the characters really care about each other and they're really going to miss each other. And Cisco doesn't want his friend to go, and Dax doesn't want to leave her friends, but she has chosen to do this anyway to be with this man that she's fallen in love with. And it really works. It really plays and has real emotional depth. And there's like maybe 1 or 2 scenes on Voyager in its entire run that even approach that.
Voyager, where Harry Kim, such a cipher, was going to be written out until the actor made People's 100 Sexiest Men list or something. So they decided to keep him on and write out Kes instead. It's like, you got a clear vision for what you're doing here, don't you?
Yeah, it's Yeah, and the whole reason they were going to write out a character in the first place was because they wanted to bring on 7 of 9 to juice the sex appeal, because nobody was watching the show because it was a horrible, boring show.
And they got rid of Jennifer Lane, who was really one of the best. I thought she was like probably the best actress on the show. She had a lot of talent. Yeah. She did very, very well with that. And they wrote her out and brought in someone who had much more prominent breasts and skin tight outfit, and boom, that's what they were looking for. And then they also replaced the pool hall with like a tanning resort. Get the characters out of their clothes as much as possible.
And then they kind of forgot about that after like a season 2. They're fuck it, you know. Then they
nothing
did.
Matters.
Nothing matters. It doesn't. Who cares? They all think they're getting home by the end of the day anyway. Yeah. Okay. So let's
90 minutes here. So yes,
we have tried the patience of the audience far enough.
We're in minute 90 of our 60-minute show.
Yeah, well, you know, what is Google going to throw me off? Come on.
I'm actually bullying enough people.
I don't bully anybody, so they might actually throw me off. It's like an inverse of what it should be. So let's call an end to it. Thanks everybody for watching. I apologize that Pierre was not here yet again. I'm sure, being a chef, that he would have had some valuable insights on the subject of bullying.
You see the whole thing about you can't be. They tell boys you can't be a chef. That's woman's work. Because who's more effeminate than Gordon Ramsay, right?
Yeah, exactly. He kind of overcompensates a little, I think. I'll just, that's my opinion. But yeah, so maybe next month.
Maybe.
Pierre, I don't know. So yeah, we had another show. We had another show named after the person that wasn't here. Whatever. Hey, whatever. Doesn't matter. Doesn't make us look bad at all.
We'll see you at some point next month.
Yeah, we'll do this again next month. So bye, everybody.